to Sarawak, what comes to mind? Rainforests, the majestic Mulu Cave, or trekking through Barko National Park?
In 2021, 1 year alone, we have in the Institute have described 27 new species. Snails, snake, plants, crab. So it was an awesome year for us, describing more species than what we have recorded in the past.
Sarawak's rich natural beauty, a haven for ecotourism, will not sustain without the dedication of biodiversity researchers. Discover more on Decimal Point. In 2024, Sarawak welcomed over 4.8 million visitors, surpassing its target of 4 million. The land of hornbills, with its UNESCO World Heritage Site, totally protected forests, national parks and nature reserves, showcases how ecotourism is a key driver of Sarawak's growing appeal. But there's more to it than just preserving the forests. Join me as we explore Sarawak, the power of biodiversity.
To look into the possibility of consolidating all the data on planet biodiversity. Consolidated under one because we are the heart of the world in terms of rainforests and biodiversity, and we consolidate through AI and we share with the world.
Prof, once more, thank you for welcoming myself. I mean, in this research institute that you have here, I can see there is like a mini museum over here as well, Prof. So maybe you can take us down a little bit on memory lane. How you all started, and then your experiences, your journey, in the research institute, and also as part of the biodiversity team that we have here, hampering. I mean, what can you share with us?
The founding fathers of UNIMAS has envisioned at that time, this was in the 1990s, early 1990s, that biodiversity is and going to be an important agenda for the nation as well as for the state of Sarawak. Having that envision, they planned and established this institute in 1994. Having the institute established in Sarawak at that time, it was the only institute of research that looked after biodiversity and species of flora and fauna. Having located in Borneo, having located in Sarawak, gave us an upper hand of being able to study many of these interesting endemic species that you don't find anywhere else in the world. If you look at history, people travel using sail ship in the past to Borneo to look at our natural history. People like famous naturalists like Alfred Russel Wallace, Italian naturalists and Dutch naturalists has explored many parts of Borneo, some of which has shed light to what we have in terms of a number of species and discovery of some ecological theories and concepts. As I mentioned, we are lucky to be here, having all the species close to us to study and explore them. This has resulted in many new findings, especially in discovery of new species. In fact, up to recent years, in 2021, 1 year alone, we have in the Institute have described 27 new species. These include snails, snake, plants, crab, freshwater crab. So it was an awesome year for us, describing more species than what we have recorded in the past. So when you have more species, this adds to the number of species richness that you have in a particular area, in this case, Sarawak. So this is great news for us in terms of discovering new species, as well as elevating our research to a higher level and globally recognized outputs.
Okay, Prof, earlier maybe you can continue on the globally acclaimed, recognitions that the Research Institute has 27 species in a year. That is really a lot. So maybe you can name a few success stories and, some of the interesting finds that you have so far.
So when I was talking about that 2021 that we discovered 27 species, some of those interesting ones are those land snails. These land snails are rather small, like micro small. When I say small, they are about 0.8 mm, maybe 1 mm, 1.2 mm. 1 mm is like the small hairline in the ruler, like a small. It's like half of that. So that's very small, and we have to use microscope. We have to sieve the soil to get them and put in water to see them float, and then you see under microscope, and then you have to identify based on the shells. And you have to write manuscripts, you have to write information about the morphometrics of the species and why you're claiming it's new species, and only once it's accepted at a relevant journal, then you can claim as it's a new species. So the process itself is quite lengthy, from the planning, discovery, writing, publication, acceptance. It's a quite lengthy process.
As we know, Sarawak is a land filled with natural resources and biodiversity. Now, in your opinion, in years in the Research Institute yourself, why is Sarawak considered a prime destination for ecotourism, and how does it actually correlate or contribute to the economy per se?
It's an interesting question indeed, I would say. Now, Sarawak is in the island of Borneo, one of the largest islands in the planet we have, and it's known for its endemicity. And endemicity means you only find that in that particular area, nowhere else in the world. So it's unique in that particular context, Borneo itself. But what is more interesting is what Sarawak has to offer. Now, Sarawak holds a high proportion of that endemicity within Borneo. So if you take example for a group of species, for example, snails, Borneo is very rich in terms of species for snails, over 600 species of snails, different types of snails, 600 types of them, 600 species of snails. Sarawak has more than 50% of those that you can find in Borneo located in Sarawak. This goes for other species as well, birds, bats, fish, so on and so forth. So the concentration of species is rather high in this part of the world, especially in Sarawak. So for ecotourism purpose, for example, one can find a good array of animals within one spot. So that's something great for Sarawak, I would say. When you have the services that are provided by biodiversity to you without really realizing the fact that you're getting these benefits, for example, pollination services, for example, watershed management, many of the chemical cycles, hydrological cycles. So all this provides stability to the environment. So when your environment is stable, when your environment is good, it's good for business. All kind of economic activities relevant to such conditions can take place in this particular area, I would say.
Prof, just now we mentioned one of the economic value tapping from the natural resources that we have in Sarawak. Other than that, we have the state's, extensive resources, maybe timber or non-timber products, rattan, bamboo, and such. But how do we align this towards sustainable forestry practices?
The state is very forward-thinking. From what I've seen past decades, very forward-thinking, forward-moving. They are in line with the national agenda. They are in line with the global requirement for many of these international standards. So the standards that you see in Sarawak, many of these are standards set at the global standard. So we are not only looking at Malaysian standard, but Sarawak is also looking at global standard, international standard. So when you look at this standard, the forest management, sustainable forest management, Sarawak aims to get 4.5 million hectares of forest under sustainably managed scheme that could be certified, so on and so forth. In fact, many of these forest patches have received recognition for its sustainable management. Interestingly, some of our studies shows that some animal species that you find in a sustainable managed forest is rather consistent to that you can find in a more pristine forest. This is very interesting because we thought that in ongoing logging forests, you should see fewer species,
Right.
different in activities, but that is not the case. Because the forest is continuous, it's large, therefore when operations are done sustainably, the impact is not as devastating when you do that to a fragmented, isolated, small forest patch. So in terms of sustainability, how they do the reduced impact logging, minimize impact to the surrounding, all these are in place. Now, if you look at the protected area system in Sarawak, we have 67 totally protected areas in Sarawak, one of the highest in Malaysia. The size of the totally protected areas in Sarawak is approximately 900,000 hectares, getting close to 900,000 hectares. That is a size, if I were to give you in proportion, slightly smaller than Perak, bigger than Negeri Sembilan. That is the size of protected areas that consists of national park, wildlife sanctuary and nature reserve that you have in Sarawak in a single state. So that is good for species of conservation importance of many of these protected areas, protect and preserves for our future generation. In Sarawak are very closely knitted to our environment, our surrounding. Many of us use natural resources in our daily livelihood, from the food to medicine to weaving baskets to music and to so many other folklore traditions and beliefs are closely associated with wildlife and plants.
The study of biodiversity also covers agriculture, plantations, plant genetics, water systems, and soil fertility. Now, these are all connected to important issues such as food security, sustainability, and economic growth. By understanding how these systems work together, we can better meet the needs of both the environment and people. Another thing that most people would say when it comes to Sarawak is the culture. So, as we know from our conversation earlier, you mentioned the biodiversity and all flora and fauna are closely related to the culture of the people in Sarawak. So, what can you comment about that? You know, being in the field for many years, how closely related is biodiversity to the people, or Sarawakians, in fact?
Now, we in general in Sarawak are very closely knitted to our environment, our surrounding. Many of us use natural resources in our daily livelihood, from the food to medicine to weaving baskets to music and to so many other folklore traditions and beliefs are closely associated with wildlife and plants. So, for example, if you look at many of the traditional dances align to how some species actually do mating rituals on the ground. For example, the Argus or Burung Ruai, the movement of the arms of the dancers resembles how the male attracts the female. in dancing. In fact, if you look at the state's logo, it is of the hornbill as its crest. It highlights strength, its dispersal ability, its endurance, and its ability to survive. Is a strong signal to showcase how the state is closely associated with its natural environment and its surrounding. So having said that, I think the state has enablers and is on the right track looking at policies, legislations in place to safeguard the biodiversity and its environment. So in Sarawak, you have Wildlife Protection Ordinance 1998, you have National Park and Nature Reserve Ordinance 1998, you have NREO, National Resource and Environment Ordinance 1993. There are so many legislation that is relevant to biodiversity protection. On top of that, the state is also moving towards formulating new policies, aligning itself to federal and international policies. For example, Sarawak is working on its policy on biodiversity, its policy on environment, carbon, so on and so forth. So from that, you can see how it's stepping and arranging its steps to be relevant and to be consistent to what is happening around the globe.
And having said that, I mean, how do you think, coming from that, towards the progress of it, any things that Sarawak maybe needs to improve over the years, or needs to consider measures to be taken to ensure the success for the next 10 years perhaps?
Now, if you look at biodiversity or wildlife, it is in the concurrent list of the federal constituency, meaning that both federal and state government have the authority over biodiversity per se, but the land belongs to the state government. So when we have set targets to get areas protected or protect the species, this involves cost. So you need funding to research on species, you need funding to pay for compensation if you need land to set aside as protected area. All these need funding. So if there's a mechanism that involves funding to states to encourage to create more protected areas or safeguard its species from federal sources, would be excellent for the state, I would say. This would definitely assist the state in creating more protected areas, creating more action plan for conserving species of conservation importance, and providing resources for successful conservation program along down the line.
What is your take as well on the fundings? I mean, is it good enough for the people or for the next younger generations to tackle on environment or conservation or its future sustainable practices, Prof?
I think the funding that we get from federal is there. What I'm implying is the funding can be targeted and be increased so that more work can be done, because there are so many successful or success story that you can see coming up from Sarawak in terms of its national park, in terms of its species. In fact, recently, like last year, we got another protected area in Sarawak that was recognized and inscribed as World Heritage Site. Sarawak is the only state in Malaysia that has two World Heritage Site. One is Mulu, the other one recently inscribed Nia National Park. So we have so many other great examples of natural heritage and the interesting elements of biodiversity that you can find in Sarawak. So I urge all stakeholders, all people who have common interests in this particular ground to come forward and support the agenda for conservation for our future generation.
Earlier we mentioned a great deal on natural resources, on acclaimed Sarawak on its World Heritage sites, and yes, that's a recent announcements that we had. And what about agriculture, Prof? How do you see the significance of agriculture towards the economy of Sarawak?
Now, we are slowly shifting our agricultural practices to a more intensive and high output farming practices compared where we have been in the past. Now you see, we are slowly replacing rubber, and now you see oil palm is in the top list of commodities, as well as in terms of acreage and area that has been planted. So I think in Sarawak we are close to 1.7 million hectares approximately of oil palm area, and it has been one of our biggest area of planted of a particular agricultural species. Now, while it's carving our landscape, while it's dominating our landscape, this particular plantation also provide socio-economic and livelihood to many of the local communities within an area. Now, if you're looking at from the environmental factor, if you're looking at from the biodiversity perspective, it's quite interesting to see that many of the oil palm plantations or oil palm landscape that you have in Sarawak are embedded with patches of forest. So when you have patches of forest within oil palm estates, that is something good for that particular area, because it provides the ecosystem services that you tend to get from a natural environment, such as pollination, regulation of water, and so on and so forth, as I mentioned earlier. So this is something interesting that you see in Sarawak with the large landscape that is spread across this region. So having these forest patches as high conservation valued areas is beneficial for this agricultural landscape, I would say.
You're speaking really enthusiastically about all the specimens we can find. You're really passionate about all these. So what pulled you actually to this field, Prof?
If I want to put it in short, I would say beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. Everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. So when I'm in the environment, in the forest, in our own backyard, I sometimes lost myself in absorbing the awness of our natural surrounding. It's very peaceful, and you don't get many new people, young blood, to do this kind of work, many of which rather inclined to be in office, in air-conditioned lab kind of work. So we need this younger generation to fill up spaces so that we don't depend for expertise from people from outside the country to come and advise us of our own natural resources. So we need more people, young blood need to train, so they are continuing the work of the pioneers in the past. Now I got a couple of years to retire, so we need young people to move forward and take charge of the other future generation to come.
Prof, earlier you mentioned on the young bloods, to be future ready. Now, what is your take on the use of the future in harnessing Sarawak's biodiversity? For them to be more in the field, because they are the futures of Sarawak. So, what is your take or your advice on the next leaders?
I mean, we cannot wait for the crisis to erupt in full force before we start looking for answers. When I say this, we are also talking about the younger generation that are replacing us in terms of studying biodiversity and studying species and studying environment, stability, so on and so forth. I mean, we need to develop new social and educational models that would assist in this particular scenario as much as possible. This model should be guided by the principle of protecting humans rather than jobs. Many jobs are uninspiring and not worth saving. Nobody's life dream is going to be sit behind a cashier counter for the rest of their lives, right? So we need to align our focus and provide people for basic needs, including the environment, safety, and the social status and self-worth. So I think this is a very critical element that we should put in our mind, because we live in a society that feels that a tree dead is worth more than one standing alive, because that's how our economics work. Unless we can come up with a new model, we will keep on doing what we are doing. By moving such manner, we may not be able to save much for the future generation.
Right.
So having said all that and giving you a picture of how Sarawak is moving with all the policies and all the documents, I foresee that Sarawak has a bright future in the context of environment sustainability if they were be able to adopt those documents and those legislation put into practice.
What would you like to see in the future of harnessing Sarawak's biodiversity and maintaining its resources towards sustainability?
Everything we have done in the past have led us where we are right now. Every single decision that we have made in the past have led to what we are saving and protecting of our natural resources. What the previous generation have left behind for us is what we are taking care of for the next generation to come. So I would urge governments, policymakers, stakeholders to continue to support conservation of biodiversity and sustainable use of our resources that we have inherited, and we shall give it back to the future generation for sustainability. I hope.
Sarawak's economic growth is not only rooted in manufacturing, construction or exports. Preserving its rich flora and fauna is also preserving Sarawak's brand. We are thankful for the dedication of these biodiversity experts. Collecting and studying specimens is safeguarding nature's wealth for future generations. Join us next time for more on Sarawak's progress on Decimal Point.